and it is the 4th birthday that he spends in jail. The 4th birthday that he spends in jail. Picking up on the insanity that Afrin has just mentioned, let's have it sink for a minute. The madness of having to have life suspended and upended with no plausible reason. And I guess, these are two roots solid enough to speak from and to start telling you a bit about how this book came into being. As Afrin said, most of what we wanted to do is to bear witness, and that's where I want to begin, but also where I will be ending. I think that there's a number of things that came together. One was the fact that, now a little less, but we started working on the book about 3.5, 4 years ago, and at that point there was that started to be talking about political prisoners, and there was discussion about political prisoners. So people talked about them, talked of them. And for us it sounded a little strange that, there were others who would speak about political prisoners, the very political prisoners who are in jail because of their ideas. And so we said, who are we as a publishing platform to reproduce the same narrative of people who have been in jail because of what they think and how they articulate their political position, to continue repeating a pattern and a narrative where they become the object of a certain kind of narrative. So there was that, but there was also the anti-national narrative, the sedition narrative. And so we felt that there was a very urgent need to produce a counter-narrative where the very same people were considered anti-national, where in fact the people who have decided to sacrifice their own lives for their ideas and their communities. So the aim in many ways was to flip the coin and show the opposite side. Whatever the Gaudiya media would say, we could counter with facts and testimonies that was all made up, was all a made up argument that served a very specific ethno-nationalist political agenda. So for us, it became impossible to separate an understanding of the current regime with the ways in which the current regime deals with dissent. And so the way we thought we could do that was by centering the very people who become a threat to the state because of their ideas. So that's where, as Afrin said, several people were uncomfortable with this idea of humanizing political prisoners. Koel Sen, Shoma Sen's daughter, got really angry at me when I told her that, and she was, what are you talking about? What are you saying? How can you humanize people who are so human that dedicate their entire life to others? And for us, and obviously for me it was a reality check in many ways, but was also a way to say, yes, for us it is, but for a public narrative, it needs to be stated, it needs to be highlighted, also the anger that it brings to the community to say, we need to rehumanize the people who are so human that because of their humanity become a threat to the state. So, it seems that I'm going around in circles, but that's completely what became our challenge. How do we do that? And so what we thought, there have been over the last 2-3 years several really interesting political and legal analysis of the situation of political prisoners, from Siddhartha Deb to Al Pasha. So there are great books out there that do exclusively a political analysis. What we wanted was something other than that, something that starts from there. And so there is context, there is literature, there is legal analysis. But then what we thought was necessary was to center the families and to center the communities that become the target of the state. Because the point is that, you know, when you incarcerate one person, you devastate an entire community. When you take one person away from the family, in many cases, and that is especially true for a lot of Muslim men who are a great number of political prisoners, you take away the livelihood of a family. So there is, and with that, you create fear and stigma within the community as well, because there is solidarity, sure, but there's also a great fear because of the rampant Islamophobia to be associated with political prisoners, because you don't want to be the next one, given that, you know, you really don't need any reason to be considered a criminal, and it's enough to be you to be considered a criminal. So I think that is also what needed to be brought into the discussion, that the evil strategy of the state, the cruelty of the state, and how the cruelty becomes a very deliberate political strategy. So the other thing that we thought it was important was to start looking at all those cases in relation to one another. Because one thing is to start thinking, oh, this happened, it's an exception. This happened is an exception. Then when you start putting things together and you start mapping things together, you realize that this is not the exception. There is a very clear pattern that repeats itself, that is very well studied, very well deliberate. So, and you know, the other thing is that, as Afreen mentioned, one thing that is absolutely important to consider and to remember is the logistics that go into creating a state of impunity of this scale. So if you will destroy a house, you need a lot of coordination, you need a lot of obedience, you need a lot of people who come together to play that evil game. So it's not the crazy whim of a single person. This is a deliberate, coordinated political strategy that comes to play with many actors who are all complicit in making this happen. So these are all the things that the book tried to put together, and tried to put together in an attempt to narrate it. We've been trying not to theorize too much, because we didn't want to replicate the same, what we saw as a mistake, like speculating on other people's lives. So central to the book is the personal testimonies, personal narratives, as well as a great chunk is a collection of writing from the political prisoners themselves. So the idea is to start from context, to create a legal analysis, and then one thing that is also very important is that we compiled a calendar to demonstrate that this is nothing new. So we started with Modi's election, and if you look at the chronology, there is an assault on the scent that goes day after day after day after day in a very structured and organized manner. And so then we close and zoom in and then center the political prisoners, their families, and their own voices. So it's just, we start large, and then our focus narrows until, you know, the political prisoners become the voice of the book that we only give space to. The final part of the book that we need to be forever grateful to Afreen is the list of political prisoners, and it's a list where 309 political prisoners are listed now with their charges and the status of their cases. And this is by no means a complete list. This is the list of what we know. There are, parts of the country that we have no idea about. There are communities that have been raided and people who have been disappeared, we have no knowledge about. So these 309 are the ones we know. And my fear is that it's just a fraction. There's many more, and there's many more who do not have access to legal counsel. And so there's places where, families can't even reach, because, if you're incarcerated in a state and then taken to a jail that is hundreds of kilometers away and you come from an underprivileged background, you can spend years and years without having even news of your dear ones who are in jail. So the tragedy is just political, but is also incredibly human. It's a story of human suffering and human resistance. And so for us, that was important to bring to the fore in ways that we thought wasn't done enough. So we hope that we've done justice to, the ambitions that we started with, and this is obviously not for me to say. What I can say is that we did all we could to try and be as faithful and as also as respectful and as grateful to the people who have shared their own stories with us. Because in a climate of great threat and fear, sitting down and sharing your story is an immense act of trust. And so our main hope is that we have done justice to that trust. Before I conclude, one thing, and I was talking about it earlier with Afreen, is just that, we often end up depicting a really grim picture. And so I don't want us to leave hopeless, where we feel that there's nothing that we can do. And so one thing that it's very important for me is, and I hope it will stay with you as well, is the fact that, political prisoners do count on us remembering them. Everyone in everyone's family told us how important it was to make sure that this continued to be remembered, that their struggle and their quest for justice continues to be remembered. And so my call for all of us is to continue to advocate and remember. And I want to conclude with the words that Hidme Markham sent us in October 2022 when we asked her to write a note that would be included in the book. Thank you. And so she wrote, "It's good to hear that outside many people are worrying for me and are campaigning for my freedom. In jail, I've seen so many people in such difficult circumstances, which has only made me stronger. If anyone thinks that I've got scared, they're wrong. I've only grown stronger, and when I come out, I will continue fight against injustice. Jail has not defeated me. I've been implicated in a false case, but that doesn't make my fight wrong. I was always fighting for justice for my people, for my land, and will continue to do so with all those who do the same. I feel connected to all of you."